Welcome to Behind the Muscle podcast. Today's guest is a contest prep and functional nutrition coach. Today's guest is Matt Cusano. Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, for sure. So, Matt, I've got a couple of questions I like to kind of kickstart each podcast off with. The first question I have for you is, who are a few of your favorite bodybuilders of all time?
Sure. So if I had to pick two, I would say Dorian Yates and Mike Metzer.
Okay. And why those two? Dorian Yates is probably pretty obvious. He comes up often, but
Yeah.
why Mike Mentzer? Because he doesn't come up too often.
I think he was a guy that, a lot of people don't appreciate what he gave to the sport in regards to training philosophies. And I think that he had it, a lot of the guys back then had it right way before their time.
Cool. All right. Let us know at what age you started lifting weights, Matt, and then why did you start lifting weights at that specific age?
Yeah, I started. So I was an on and off lifter in high school. I started uh, initially at the age of like 14. Got pretty big into it, and then I got old enough to drive cars and party and stuff like that. I got out of any type of school related athletics and just enjoyed my high school and college experience. So where I got back into lifting was when I started college again. And that's when it really got serious. I was doing mixed martial arts around age 18, 19, 20. That got me into lifting. And then as I got more into lifting, I realized that I enjoyed, getting big and getting strong more than I enjoyed combat sports. And the bigger and stronger I got, the slower I got at combat sports. So I had to make a choice at some point, and I really just started getting more and more involved in the idea of physique enhancement and bodybuilding. And, I just pulled the trigger and made that my main go-to.
Excellent. Okay, so I kind of like to use that latter question, Matt, just to kind of transition into my guests' upbringing, their backstory, childhood, because it's kind of always fun through social media. Mostly nowadays, we see kind of like the end result or a close to finished product, right, of people's lives or what have you. However, you kind of want to word that or look at that, but we're all where we're at today because we have a backstory, because we have a childhood, we have people that influenced when we were younger. So talk about where you grew up, paint that picture of your childhood, talk about maybe some of the sports you were involved with. You said you partied a little bit. So just talk about what you were like when you were younger up to about high school. And then I've got some questions to kind of transition us from there.
Yeah, so I grew up in different parts of Florida. I had a pretty easy upbringing to be honest, compared to a lot of others. I didn't have a lot of hardships, thank God. Um, as far as sports, I played a slew of different sports, but I excelled the most at basketball and soccer. I played those going into high school. And then it was around sophomore year in high school. I'm only 5'9", so I quickly realized that I'm too short for basketball. And I just, I wasn't the best soccer player in the world. And I just had different goals in high school than to continue pursuing sports.
So only child, any siblings? What's that like?
I have an older sister. She's 5 years older than me. As far as like athleticism, my family as a whole has never been, big athletes. My dad was a very skilled golfer, but that doesn't require a ton of athletic ability. Um, so there wasn't too much inspiration from family members in regards to that. As a matter of fact, when I first got into bodybuilding, my family wasn't the biggest fan of it because they thought of it as unhealthy and all that stuff. So believe it or not, when I was a competitive bodybuilder in my 20s, my family has never seen me compete. So it's not that they didn't support me, but they weren't like that type of supportive family that were at my shows holding signs and doing all that type of stuff that we see these days.
Yeah, for sure. Were there any adults, coaches, family members, teachers, anybody that you can kind of think of, or you look back now as an adult that had a really big influence on you during your childhood or your younger years, or not so much?
Not so much, honestly. I can't think of anyone truly who had a an impact that stands out to me. I learned from a ton of people, and I'm kind of the type of person that picks things up along the way. And so I feel like every single person that I've interacted with in my life, in a good or bad way, has helped me grow and educate myself. So I can't think of anyone specifically, but I would say literally every single person has had some type of impact that's brought me here today.
Hmm. So, what were you thinking about you wanted to do career wise when you're in high school? Because most of us have some sort of thoughts about that, right? When we're in high
Sure.
school. And then once you graduated high school, you mentioned college. So, what did you go to college to study? Did you finish college? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So originally, I mean, when we're in high school, our main thought process of when we want to get older is typically, I mean, not everyone, but a lot of us think about money. We want to be successful and stuff like that. So going into college and finishing up my high school, I was very interested in pre-law. Um, so that was the initial approach I took when I started college. I was doing a lot of history classes and pre-law style classes. Um, and that was right around the time I was also getting so involved in bodybuilding. So I actually shifted my majors quite a few times in my college career. First, it was pre-law. Then I was going to college in UCF in Orlando. Orlando is very big on customer service and that type of industry because of Disney and bars and restaurants and stuff. And I was at that age where I got into bartending and serving at restaurants. So for a minute, I actually thought that I was going to be interested in that type of scenario where I managed or owned bars or restaurants. I even did courses where I was a wine sommelier and doing wine tasting with a lot of um, couriers around Orlando. So I went from pre-law into business with a focus on the service industry. But then as my passion grew more and more, I decided to switch everything up and get into exercise science. And that's what I ended up completing my major in was exercise science.
Cool. Yeah, that's kind of a unique transition for
I
sure.
know. I know.
Cool.
It was mainly because, I think almost everyone when they first start college, they really don't know what their passion is. There's a small percentage of people who truly know what they're doing when they enter college. And at the time I didn't have a passion. I just knew that I wanted to make enough money to have an enjoyable life. And so when you think about that, you think, okay, attorneys make a lot of money and stuff like that. That's an enjoyable life. But as I got integrated in the college community, and I think this happens to a lot of people, we start shifting our focus away from money and stuff like that and more towards what we truly wanted to be happy with. And I knew that science and biology and the human body, that's what intrigued me. That's what I was passionate about. And so it was a no-brainer to make that switch.
I got a question for you because I've heard actually Matt Jansen talk on this and some other higher level coaches within the fitness bodybuilding industry, and they talk about how coaches nowadays are kind of basically glorified customer service type people. So I guess what I want to ask you, Matt, your however long it was, your experience within kind of the restaurants and the wine scene and kind of all of that, type of business. Did that teach you some lessons that have kind of spilled over into being a coach? And if so, talk a little bit about some of those lessons or what you learned during that time, kind of in more what we would call customer service restaurant type businesses.
I 100% think that's true. And I say this to a lot of people because, there's this, especially nowadays with the whole talk of student loan forgiveness, there's a lot of arguments back and forth of like the benefits of college and how worthwhile it truly is. And one thing that I will say, a lot of my success these days in my current businesses don't trace back to what I learned in books in college. However, I did learn a lot of experiences in college, and college forces you to, number one, do things that you don't want to do things with people that you don't want to do it with. And those two factors right there are huge for being successful in business and huge for customer service. And then anyone who's ever worked as a bartender or a server basically knows that you have to take shit with a smile on your face and say, yes, sir, and let me fix that for you. So, yeah, so absolutely. Learning all of that or experiencing all of that has helped me have a personality that works well with a lot of different personalities. And I think that's a very important trait for coaches. You have to be able to handle a lot of different personalities. I currently coach over 100 clients. So you can imagine how many different people I'm interacting with, different moods and stuff like that from a day-to-day basis. And I do think that that is a challenge for a lot of up and coming coaches is their ability to work with a lot of different types of personalities. And I think that that's a challenge for a lot of entrepreneurs in modern day society. I think this is probably the highest level of entrepreneurs that we've ever had in America. And a big things that I see is with some who are not as successful is their inability to work well with tons of different people and just their overall concept of what customer service is. I think that those two factors can be a big hindrance with any type of business ownership.
Hmm. Okay, now I want to pull back a little bit on what you just said, pull back a layer. Now, in terms of like customer service, like for myself personally, like I've when I was in college and post college, I worked at a restaurant, okay, and worked like in retail, like at J.C. Penney's and things like that. So customer service, like I understand the customer service, like in those type of settings. Now, where is the balance, Matt, or is there a balance for like you have as Matt Cusano, like you have your own personality, and then you said you have like over 100 clients. They're all bringing their own personality, their own life experiences. You have your own life experience. So where is the balance, if there is a balance? And I'm asking this because I'm curious to know, like, that customer service thing, like, I grew up with a dad who was a manager of a local like grocery store, and then he had his own business, and my parents were entrepreneurs after that and things like that. And my dad used to always say, and I've heard other people say, managers and bosses say, the customer is always right. Now, I personally, through my own life experiences and owning a gym and different things like that, I don't believe in that statement. Like, I don't believe the customer is always right. So I guess what I'm trying to get at, how do you kind of have like your own values and your own personality and not kind of just give into what the clients want and kind of lose who you are and kind of stand your ground? Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100% it does. I've actually had this conversation recently. So I believe that statement, and it's an old statement. I believe that statement sometimes gets taken out of context. So what we have to understand is, I think a better way of putting it is the customer is not always wrong. I think that's a better way of going about it. But if, like you said, this is very different than like if I'm serving someone a drink and they don't like it, that's on me to fix that. If I program something for someone and they don't like it, well, too bad, because there's a differentiation between emotional desires and rational thinking. So when it comes to programming as a coach, for me specifically, it's all about a needs analysis. So we're taking a very scientific approach and we're dissecting what their body actually needs to be successful. And that could be just simply from a bodybuilding standpoint, analyzing their weak points, deciding how to prioritize their training and nutrition. Um, from a physiological standpoint, looking at blood work and deciding, hey, you're not even in place to do a contest prep or a growth phase. We need to go through a health phase, optimize metabolic function, optimize nutrient partitioning, and prime the body before we even get into this. So there's a little bit of giving the client what they want, but also not giving the client what they want, because what they want isn't what's best for their body. And so at the end of the day, they're hiring me to do what's best for their body. And so that's kind of that balance, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, 100%. And I really value and appreciate that clarification, that perspective. So you got your degree in exercise science. You had a little, I think, uptake in terms of kind of getting back into lifting weights and getting a little bit more interested in physique enhancement, as you said earlier, with the MMA. Now, talk to me a little bit. I'm assuming we're probably close to around the same age. So back, kind of the early 2000s, mid 2000s, MMA, UFC really started exploding, and people our age, you had all the MMA paraphernalia, clothing, and
Oh yeah, tap out shirts and everything.
tap out and all that type of stuff, and
Yep.
anyways, but did you just kind of like get exposed to MMA while you were in college? It just kind of appealed to you, kind of that, macho thing. Just talk about that, and then talk about that transition into actually bodybuilding and getting kind of more focused on that.
Yeah, so as I finished high school, I actually had a few friends who were training for it themselves, and that's actually where I was first introduced to it. And I think one Saturday night we ended up going and watching a fight at a bar, and that just kind of increased my desire. And then when I moved to Orlando for college, like you said, the scene was huge there, and I just ended up seeking out a local facility and dove right into it, and that kind of took it from there.
Cool. What did you what were some of your experiences during your time doing MMA that benefited you now, or you kind of look back and are glad that you had those experiences? And then just lead us into kind of getting into the depths of bodybuilding.
Um, as far as experiences go, meeting tons of people but from different backgrounds was great. Obviously the ability for self-defense, and I did a combination. I started out doing mainly Muay Thai, and then I did get more into the MMA and jiu-jitsu side of things, and both definitely teach you about patience, because if you're too what's the word, if you jump into something too quickly, you could end up getting yourself caught up in quite the mess. And so you have to be very strategic with your maneuvers and be very patient. It's almost like a chess match. And so learning that, I think, has helped me, even now, 15, 20 years later.
So then lead us into kind of like getting into to all things bodybuilding for yourself, Matt.
Yeah, so like I said, the bigger I got and the stronger I got, the more I enjoyed it. And the less I enjoyed getting punched in the face all the time. I was getting to that point in MMA where they were starting to do amateur fights. And so it was getting to that next level where you're literally training to do cage fights. And it was at that point where you kind of had to decide, am I all in for this? Or do I just want to do some heavy bag classes a few times a week? And when you're doing, 5 rounds of sparring with 10 different people and just getting your ribs kicked in, your face punched in, and all this and that, it's just like, man, you know, I just kind of faded out of it. And around that same time, I had a guy approach me at my gym, huge black guy, 22-inch arms, like super impressive at the time. He's like, "Are you a competitor?" And I'm like, "No, but I'm interested in it." And he's just like, "Well, I'm actually a coach, excuse me, and a show promoter. You should do it. You should do my show." So he ended up being my first coach, taking me through that show. Um, and I was just hooked from there.
Okay, now talk to us a little bit about that first experience with this coach then, because obviously you're a coach now. Looking back, was it a good experience? Was it a bad experience? And what did you take away from that experience with that first coach?
Knowing what I know now, I was not the best client. I was not extremely coachable because, I was 21, seeing great results, blasting gear. So, I only needed so much help. I obviously looked up to him because he was massive compared to me. And he's everything that I wanted to do. So I trusted him in a lot of regards. But looking back now, what I noticed is number one, I didn't give him nearly enough time. Um, I, I I originally told him, let me see what I can do on my own, and if I need your help, I'll hire you for the rest of the prep, which we both know never works out. So to be fair to him, I didn't give him a ton of time. I wasn't 1,000% on the diets. I was pretty strict, but I wasn't 1,000% and stuff like that. I still partied every now and then because it was college, and I wouldn't tell him those types of things. So I wasn't the best. I wasn't good about communication at all. Um, but that being said, he also wasn't the most skilled coach. He was just an experienced bodybuilder himself, so everything he programmed for me was just what he would do. And he was a 225-pound, heavyweight national level bodybuilder. And I was this 180-pound, white guy, brand new to it all. So he did help me a lot. He got me in the best shape of my life. I'd say the most disappointing thing was because he was the show promoter, he wasn't there for me at the show. He was too busy. And I had no one to prepare me for that. So I'm backstage, like, what do I do? Do I drink water? Do I pump up? All these different factors. And there was nobody there for me. And like, I was running around looking for him backstage, but he's the fucking promoter. So, that ended up kind of like disappointing me. But looking back now, it was, you put it all in perspective. It wasn't his fault, so to speak. But after that show, I actually had another guy who was watching me do my prep at that gym. He approached me after the show, asked me how it went, and he was even more impressive than my current coach. And so we talked about things, and then he ended up doing my next off season, and his education was that much further, so he got me significantly further. He was actually, I'd say, the biggest influence that I had to really push for bodybuilding and become a bodybuilding coach myself. I was part of that team for a couple years, and watching him grow as a coach himself. He initiated the course for a lot of big name people that we know today. I don't know if you're familiar with Danny Reardon. Her name was Lil Monster back in the day. She was actually my teammate, and he was her first coach. He created Little Monster. Um, Sean Roden was part of us. This was before Sean Roden was Sean Roden. So seeing him grow that success was very inspiring to me. And that's what kind of really made me think, like, yeah, I want to do this too. Um, and shortly after I graduated from UCF, I decided to move up to North Carolina to work with a friend of mine. We started our own personal training company up in North Carolina. So that's really where my coaching first took off. doing that personal training company in the gym, there was no one else there who had any type of competitive experience. So we literally had this girl come in and say, I want someone to coach me for a bikini show. And they're like, go to that guy. I'd never coached anyone before or anything. I was the one person with a smidge of experience. Um, Took her through her first show, and she ended up winning. And then people just started trickling in from there. And before you know it, I was a bikini coach. And then before you know it, I started getting some men, and it just continued to grow from there.
Hmm. Okay, before we dive into all things coaching, I want to pull out from you, Matt. So you had that first experience with your first coach that was the show promoter. And then you had your experience with this other coach that sounds like he actually had kind of like a team and things like that. And you said the second experience was much better. And that was like a huge catalyst of you becoming who you are today in terms of coaching and having that interest. Now, what was the from the get-go, right? So you get done with your first competition with that first coach, and then this other guy approaches you and he does that off season with you. So from the end of the first coach to the beginning of the second coach, what was the biggest difference between the two, and why did you say kind of to yourself like, hey, like I think I'm going to stick with this guy and this team because of why?
He just seemed a lot more knowledgeable. And again, I think some of that comes from the fact that I gave the first guy just such little time. He had no time to get to know my body and stuff like that. But to be completely fair, all he really did was drop my carbs and increase my drugs. And so there was no education. There was no, this is why you're taking this. This is why you're doing this. There was none of that. And he didn't even do my workouts. I did my own workouts. So when I got with the second guy, he took full control, and he was not the nicest. I was his first ever client. So this was before he even started his team. I was like his experimental client. So, a lot of us can kind of come off rough around the edges, at least starting out before we become more personal. And do you remember back, because you're around, I'm 35. How old are you?
Same age as you.
All right. So we're the same age. So you're around the same time as me. You remember how big Animal Pack was?
Oh, of course. Yes.
So my second coach looked like he was straight up out of an animal magazine. 22-inch calves, huge forearms, tattoos, everything, just monstrous. And so you're just like looking at this guy, and he's not a nice guy. He would be like, he'd look at something that I was doing. He's like, why the fuck would you do that? And I'd be like, I don't know. Tell me what to do better. And so he just like, no bullshit, said it straight and said, you're gonna do this, you're gonna do this, and this is why. And it just made a lot of sense to me. I liked the explanation. I liked how hard he was. And he pushed me. He pushed me a lot. So all those factors definitely made a difference.
Now, here's a fun question to follow up with what we talked about earlier. This second coach, what would you give him in terms of a grade for his customer service? On a scale of 1 to 10, what would you give him in today's culture? Today's culture, though, that's the caveat.
Okay, in today's culture, a 2. Yeah.
He'd have this culture crying, wouldn't he?
He would never coach a single female athlete.
Yeah.
I'll put it to you that way. And he would never coach men's physique because they couldn't handle the truth the way he was going to give it to them.
Right.
I
just had to, that's just a fun question. I'm just having a little fun there because, and that kind of solidifies or kind of like, I guess, ties into what we were chatting about earlier. Like, I think I guess it kind of depends upon what you're trying to do, maybe business-wise with the whole coaching industry, because I think there is a time and a place for somebody like that, even in today's culture. Some people I feel like respond better to that type of an attitude. Other people need more of the coddling. They need more of the coaching and the mindset. But that's where it's just like each of us has different personalities, and you might be able just to be like that second coach and have a huge business and you know, have a huge team like it sounds like you did, and everything's good. But then, so I guess it's just kind of like, I guess it's the direction you want to go with your coaching and how you guess, I guess, kind of want to portray yourself, right?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, anyone who listens to this podcast, they're going to listen to that story and say, okay, now I know why Matt is the way he is. Because I'm not a cop. You know, I can be a hard ass. I can be super empathetic, but I'm going to set you straight. You know, if you're not ready for a show, I'm going to say we're not doing the show. And if you come to me with an unrealistic time frame, like I need to gain 20 pounds in the next 6 months, I'm going to be like, that's ridiculous. But I'm going to explain to you the science and explain to you a rational approach to your goals, and try to work with you from like a compromise of how can we do this together. Let's just shift things around a little bit. I do think that um, my experience as a functional coach, working in cases of hormone imbalance, gut issues, autoimmune dysfunction, that has allowed me to soften up my approach a little bit, because these are not serious athletes. It's one thing if you come to me and say, I want to be a pro athlete, okay, I'm going to be hard as shit on you. I'm going to be that high school football coach because you just told me you want to be a professional athlete. But if you come to me and you know you're trying to fix Hashimoto's and get your gut health in line, I'm not gonna be that dickhead who's grinding you every week. So now I've kind of found that balance, and I combine those approaches, and I do think that that has led to more success because a lot of people liked the hard ass, but a lot of people didn't. And so I probably was hindering, you know, my clientele at a certain point by being that super hard ass. But if I had to go back, you know, I wouldn't change that for the world, because when it comes down to what I'm providing for someone, being a hard ass is going to get you to where you want to be better than being a cheerleader and a coddler. And that's something we see way too rampant in the bodybuilding world, is these people who they're not even coaches. They're just like, oh, you're doing great. You know, you're looking great, this and that, best package to date, when we can look at their photos and they haven't changed in 2 fucking years. Stop lying to them. It's not their best package to date. They need to stop cheating. They need to take a real off season, work harder, and get better. And I think that's my biggest rant about social media, is how much, you know, BS there is.
Oh yeah. Do you want to take that further? I mean, go
We
for it.
can, we
I'm right
can.
with you, and I think it's good for people to hear this. So go for it if you want.
I mean, at the end of the day, if you haven't made progress in 2 years, how is it helpful for me to say you did a great job and this is your best package today? Are you going to improve from that? Absolutely not. I need to look you in the eyes and say, look, you know, for whatever reason, we have not seen progress, or we have not seen enough progress. And I will actually take pictures, because a lot of times people are delusional and they lie to themselves. So I've had situations where people are like, I feel so much better than last season. Okay, but let's look at a side by side. You're actually worse. So sometimes you just have to be real with people and say, like, let's take a step back and analyze what we could both do better. I'm a very analytical person, and I take losses very serious. So when an athlete doesn't do well, anyone will tell you I go into a depression. I blame myself, and it can sometimes take days for me to recover. That's gotten better over the years. You know, I've been coaching now for 11 years, but starting out, I took it really hard. I have never once been one of those coaches that blames the athlete. I always blame myself, even if it wasn't my fault. It's like, why did I put this person on stage? Like, why did I embarrass myself like this? You know, um, could I have done better for them? Could I have peaked them better? Could I have done this? Should I have just told them to wait and do a different show? All those things go on in my mind. And some might say that that's a detriment, that I never once blame athletes. But I look at it as a benefit, because every single mistake I've ever made was a lesson that led to me improving. And there's far too many narcissistic coaches in this industry that never learn their lessons. If you blame an athlete, how does that make me better? If I say, well, they cheated their diet all prep, so this wasn't on me, how do I improve from that? We can all improve. And so I'm forever judging myself as much as I'm judging them about how we can both be better. And if the show ended up being a complete shit show, sometimes I'll just do a call. I'll let the dust settle a day or two, and then I'll do a call and say, "Hey, look, I feel like we dropped the ball a little bit as a team. This is what I feel like I may have missed, and this is what I feel like you may have missed. Tell me your thoughts on what we both could do better." Sometimes that conversation goes well. Sometimes they're not as receptive to that type of conversation. But when they are, I feel like that's how you grow.
Yeah. Excellent, man. Okay, so now I want to so let's wrap up kind of like you being a competitive bodybuilder. So how many shows total did you do? And then was there a point that you just kind of said, all right, Matt, like I'm gonna kind of just really take this business thing and coaching thing as far as I can? And did you kind of just put the bodybuilding competitively on the back burner? Talk about that transition.
Yeah, so I did a total of 6 shows in my career, and there was a big space in between some of those shows because of college and partying and just doing other things. Like you said, I at my final show, I was already getting busy as a coach. So the weeks leading into my show, I had prepped and peaked 17 athletes for other shows. That was 2 weeks out of my show. So 2 weeks out of my show, I'm having 17 people reach out to me wanting feedback, wanting game plans. Some weren't happy with me. Some, were excited for the next step. All these emotions, and here I am 2 weeks out, you know? So there was that situation there that I could tell, okay, this is hindering my success, but also I'm a very realistic person. I never had those top tier genetics. Like I said, my family wasn't even athletes. Um, I knew that I did not have the genetics to take this far. And even if I pushed the envelope with anabolics and stuff, it was only going to get me so far. Um, so I made a decision that instead of being selfish and keep trying to do both, I should just focus my attention towards athletes who have a lot more promise than I do in the sport. Because I realized that last prep made me realize that by doing both, I'm a shittier athlete and a shittier coach. And if I'm going to take people's money and they put their trust in my hands and stuff like that, I want to give them all of that. And at that point too, I think because of the whole genetic situation too, I was just getting turned off from competing. I was starting to realize my limitations. This was also when Instagram was just getting bigger and bigger. So as well as I do, you and I, we were bodybuilding before Instagram. I was bodybuilding before my cell phone had a camera on it to take a selfie. Most of these motherfuckers don't know about times back then,
Right.
where the only time we could actually learn about a bodybuilder was through a Flex magazine, you know? Facebook was a thing, but Facebook wasn't pushing bodybuilding. It wasn't until Instagram that we really started connecting with people around the world. And we really started to see how other people measured up to us on a day to day basis. So I think for a lot of people, that was eye opening. Like, holy shit, there's some 19-year-old kid shoulder pressing 100-pound dumbbells, and I'm never going to be anything you know so I think it was around that time that Instagram was getting big and you start recognizing just how genetic elite other people are. um that I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to shift my focus and passion towards helping others. And it was at that point that my coaching truly took off, and in the next couple of years I started making a lot of IFBB pros, started having a lot more success. So needless to say, it was the right choice versus me doing local level shows.
But I do want to ask you though, Matt, do you feel like the 6 competitions that you did, are you glad that you had those experiences so that you can better relate to athletes now? Or do you feel like it's kind of a toss up?
No, I mean, I absolutely am glad I did it. I mean, I loved doing bodybuilding, and I still love bodybuilding. I don't think that you should be coaching bodybuilders if you yourself have never done a prep. You can have all the education in the world, but you don't know what it's like. You know, and keep in mind, my coaches weren't the most educated back then. So I did the 90 minutes of stair climber or 2 hours of stair climber. I passed out from hypoglycemia on the way from home from fasted cardio. I did the zero carbs for months on end. The high levels of T3 and the high levels of androgens. I did all those things. So and I had successful shows and I had unsuccessful shows. So I know what it all feels like. I know what it feels like to not have your family support or your partner's support going into a show. I know all those feelings. And so I think that allows me to connect with my clients on a little bit better level, and just have that empathy. And the same thing with functional health. I've battled my own poor GI health since I was 20. At the age of 20, I was diagnosed with an H. pylori bacteria overgrowth, and I had ulcers in my esophagus already at the age of 20. So I've had GI dysfunction for almost 2 decades now, and that in itself has been its own battle. And healing those things and fixing those things is not easy. It's in fact harder than contest prep. So being able to tell people, I know how bad it is. I've been through it all. And being able to tell people, I know how bad it is to wish your genetics were better to be more successful in bodybuilding. Like I've been through all of that.
Love it, man. And I agree with you 100%. I think it's important to have those experiences so you can relate to other people. Now, I want to transition fully into more in depth with the coaching talk. So you moved up to North Carolina, I believe you said, right? And then
Yep.
you opened up the personal training studio, had the bikini girl successful with her. Now, the question I want to ask you, Matt, you had done like 2 competitions and everybody's like, hey, he's the guy for prepping you for your competition. Did you have any fears? Did you have any hesitancy in prepping that first lady for that competition, knowing that you maybe weren't the most prepared coach yourself? If so, how did you kind of work through that mentally? And then just talk about the metamorphosis of your coaching business and your success up to this point.
So it's funny. I actually had no fear or hesitation. I think I had a inappropriate level of confidence back then, mainly because I was the only competitor around the gym. So who else was going to coach her, you know? And so I had a inappropriate level of confidence going in. And honestly, as I educated myself and became a better coach, that's when like my confidence went down because one thing I'm sure you've probably heard it before, and other coaches will say it too. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know.
Yep.
You don't know shit. And so you kind of start out confident and then go down and then slowly come back up. But the whole way up, you're still questioning yourself, you know? So yeah, at first I had no hesitations. I'm like, yeah, I got this. I'm gonna, wreck this girl. Luckily she was a first time bikini girl, so everything was a shock on her body. Everything just worked. The diet worked, even though it was not the most educated diet. The training worked, even though it wasn't the most educated training regimens. Everything worked because it was a honeymoon period for her. It was brand new to her body. And so, of course, everyone at the gym is just like, holy shit, this guy is amazing. Look how he's transforming this girl. And so I'm just like, you know, it was more down the line. I'd say probably my third season of coaching when I had more people under my belt. That's when people stop responding, and that's when you start recognizing, oh shit, I don't know so much. the honeymoon first time novice competitors, they all respond. You know, throw them on some Anavar, take them through some intense training, take them through cardio, and drop their food. They're going to respond. But it's that season number 2, season number 3, season number 4, the body is way more adaptive to everything, and now you have to actually use your brain and understand adaptations and stuff like that. And so that's what led to me really starting to enhance my education, was because I was just scratching my head like, geez, you know, why are they not responding like last year?
Okay, now talk a little bit about obviously success breeds success, but just talk about a little bit of that education of yourself, that transformation in terms of your coaching and your growth. And I'm very curious, Matt, who were some of the maybe other coaches or industry leaders or people that maybe it's outside the fitness bodybuilding industry community, but who are some of those people that you've gleaned from, learned from, modeled your coaching after? And again, just talk about that metamorphosis of your coaching business and your growth personally, which obviously spills over into your business.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think every coach is going to throw out Matt Jansen out there. Um, he was definitely someone I was paying attention to starting out, and maybe not for the same reasons everyone else was. The reason that I liked Matt Jansen was because I connected with him on a more personal level in the fact that he was not impressive. He was a small little white guy with shitty genetics, and if he never met Dallas McCarver, we would never know who he is. That's the truth. Dallas McCarver is the only reason we know who Matt Jansen is today. So I connected with him. I say I connected with him. I felt a connection with him because I wasn't that super impressive guy. So as I grew into the North Carolina coaching community, everybody was just like, who's this guy? You know, I didn't have friends. This was a different time for bodybuilding coaching where we were all rivals. It was every man against himself, and we were in fact just shit talking each other, you know, fighting over the same clients around Charlotte and stuff like that. So, and then of course, as you're first starting out, a lot of people, especially back then, were looking at your physique as a testament to your ability as a coach. And so that's why the first couple of years I was a bikini coach, because literally guys would look at me and be like, this guy, you know? And I'm not a small guy. I'm 5'9", 210, but I'm not a bodybuilder. You know, I don't look like a bodybuilder. So a lot of people, I think, judged me on my physique versus my knowledge and capacity as a coach. And so I think that's why I connected with Matt, because he was kind of in that similar boat. And he had to prove his skill set to grow his business, not through his own physique success. And so that was definitely one of the first people that I was inspired by. But as far from an educational standpoint, I really started to learn more from Matt Porter. That was a big one. That was around the time that I was really trying to get more into the scientific approaches of things. Matt Porter, Alex Keuchel, Jason Theobald. He was one of the first ones that started helping me with the functional side of things and getting my own GI issues fixed. So some of the coaches from the Scooby Prep family helped me on my own gut health journey. Austin Stout is another one. So, you know, I've taken some online courses and stuff like that. I've never done formal mentorships. A lot of it was just learning through getting myself healthy and just learning through experience of working with clients. Like I said, I did take some online courses. I did connect with a board certified functional health physician about 6 years back now. And so I would say that was probably a mentorship, but he had no bodybuilding knowledge. That was strictly functional medicine. but learning that deeper understanding of stress and the adaptations to stress and the thyroid and sex hormones and gut health and inflammation, that quadrupled my skills as a bodybuilding coach. So learning all those functional approaches is what really enhanced the bodybuilding side of things. Because bodybuilding is a lot of just experiences. It's not actual like factual stuff. As we've grown up the past 20 or 30 years, it's just some big name guy saying this worked for me, so this is what you should do it. There's not real scientific explanations. There's what they think is an explanation. In their mind, a cause and effect, but it's not a factual scientific explanation. So learning the true science of everything is what really got me passionate. And honestly, it's pulled me away of a lot of the bodybuilding stuff, because the bodybuilding stuff is just garbage. It's incorrect. Um, so now I'm at a point where lately I do still love bodybuilding, but I'm not nearly as entrenched in bodybuilding as I once was, because I'm so entrenched into science, you know?
No, that absolutely makes sense. So, I guess I want to ask you then, Matt, at what point did you realize, like, man, this coaching thing is going to be my career. It's going to pay my bills. It's going to give me, the life that I want in terms of financial stability and whatever else you might want to pursue in your future, business wise and beyond. Like, at what point was there a moment in time where in your mind you're like, man, like, I've got something here, and this could be something big? Like, did you have that point in time, or have you been so engrossed in it you're just kind of evolving and taking it one day at a time and going with what comes your way?
A little bit of both. So, with the personal training industry, my partner and I ended up evolving into starting our own 24/7 gym. So I actually owned a gym just outside of Charlotte for a couple of years. Um, and that's when my bodybuilding team was starting to grow. And my partner moved away, so we decided to sell the gym after a couple of years. And at that point, I was all I had left was my bodybuilding business. So that's where I guess you could say I truly dove into, okay, this is full time, bodybuilding. I I knew that this was my passion, and I knew that I was good at it. Even back then, I was 50 times worse than I am now, but I was still good in comparison to everyone else around me. So I always had the confidence that this is what I was going to be good at and this is what I was going to do. But my goal originally was just to have a comfortable life doing it. If I can make ends meet and do what I love, that's cool. You know, it wasn't until I'd say 2018, 2019 that I really started to take off in regards to the demand for my coaching. And I started to realize, like, wow, I could actually make good money doing this. This is more than just being comfortable. This is being successful. And I'd say where I really turned a corner financially at comfortability and success wise was 2019, 2020. That even with COVID happening, my business just took off. And I'm very blessed and thankful for that.
And so what was the catalyst for that then? I mean, we all know 2020 was a wild year for just about everybody. So how did you continue and continue to grow success wise with coaching during that year? What was it that you did business wise to turn that corner?
Well, I've always been big on actions speak louder than words, and word of mouth type of marketing. I've never in my 11 years of coaching, I've never publicly ran a sale. I've never done any type of marketing techniques. All I do is post client results, and those results bring me people. And so while I may have hindered my business for like 5 or 6 years by doing it that way, I felt that that was the right way to do things. And so I took the slow approach. It took me 11 years to see success. Some people are seeing success 2 to 3 years in because they've mastered marketing and podcasts and social media and stuff like that. But do they have the skills to sustain that popularity is the question that has yet to be determined, you know? So I built my brand up slow, if you will, and slowly increased that demand. When 2020 hit, I think every single coach took a dive, like in those first few months where everything shut down and there was just so much uncertainty. I actually decided to use that time to continue education further. I did some more online courses and continued working with my functional doctor. Um, so during that time, because bodybuilding was put on hold, I put more of an emphasis on advertising my functional coaching successes. And at that point in time, health was such a important topic that I think a lot more people were intrigued with health optimization. And so that just kind of increased the functional coaching side of things. And then I just kind of blended them more and more, blended those two approaches. So by the end of 2020, that's about the time that we started seeing athletes pass away too. 2020, 2021, these past 2 to 3 years. So now even bodybuilding is taking a more health conscious approach. So it was kind of the perfect timing that I was kind of one of those first people to, push that health conscious approach into the bodybuilding world. And I think ever since then, people have just been more and more people have been attracted to that idea of optimizing health while optimizing physique progress, and thinking more long term versus just short term. So I think that that's kind of how it all has continued to grow. And then in 2021, I decided to start taking on assistant coaches and starting mentoring other coaches. So now I have two coaches underneath me who are both awesome coaches themselves and have had a lot of success. So I think all of that has just been kind of a step by step continual growth process.
Mm. Love it, man. Love it. All right, we're gonna kind of start wrapping up things up here, Matt. Before we do, I saw on your Instagram that you're the clinical director at Rejuvenate HRT. Share a little bit more about that with us, please.
Yeah, so that's actually a pretty new venture that just started earlier this year. I linked up with Rejuvenate HRT. They were a hormone replacement clinic that they were around for about a little over a year, but the owner decided to he didn't he didn't like the way things were going with their current process, so he decided to basically completely rebrand the place and outsource educated minds to help him create a better facility. And him and I connected, and I basically told him that, my dream was to have a legitimate clinic to bring not only my functional clients to, but bring athletes to that we could trust. They have the knowledge of bodybuilding, they have the knowledge of the risks that we take, and they're not, number one, they're not going to judge us on it. Number two, they're actually going to be willing to support us. Because I'm sure you've had your experience where the minute a doctor hears about steroids, they're done helping you and they're just judging. So that's not going to help anyone. We need to blend the medical industry with bodybuilding to make sure that people are as healthy as possible and seeing the best progress possible. So myself and this owner decided to completely redo the clinic. We got, all new staff, and we shifted it to a 100% legitimate functional medicine practice we're not just pushing hormones, we're not just pushing products, which is what a lot of clinics do. It's a business. They're trying to make money, but we're pushing health. And so sometimes it might mean somebody needs, some HRT support. Sometimes it might mean that they need functional health coaching. They need help fixing their gut. They can balance their hormones naturally by reducing stress and inflammation. We fix thyroid dysfunction without medications. So sometimes we use Western medicine, sometimes we're not. And it needs educated minds to differentiate those two. Um, so that's basically our facility. We're the first of its kind, 100% functional medicine facility. The thing that makes us so great is we are telehealth, so we work in all 50 states. We don't necessarily have a home-based clinic. We are available to every single United States citizen, and we ship products directly to their door. So what I've been doing lately is, we just recently sponsored some professional athletes. We have a professional women's bodybuilder. We have two professional Olympia wellness competitors. And we have a lot of great national level and pro level ambassadors as well. So now what I've started doing is trying to be that middleman, working with both a client and their coach to help guide them on, hey, look, this is what your comprehensive blood work says. This is why X, Y, and Z is off. And here's the steps that we can make to help support you, whether you're currently in prep, whether you're recovering from prep, or you're trying to optimize a health phase or trying to optimize a growth phase. We help educate people about smarter, low risk approaches based off of what we've learned now in science and the medical industry.
Love it, man. What's your long-term goal, Matt, for yourself in terms of business, or what's kind of the long-term vision that you have for yourself that you are working towards in terms of whatever you want to do, whatever you want to pursue, whatever you want to accomplish business-wise?
That's a good question. I haven't thought too far in advance. Honestly, my number one goal right now is just continued growth. I want to continue growing my bodybuilding business and continue helping my assistant coaches grow their business. And I want to continue growing with the clinic. Like I said, we're a couple months into the rebranding. So we have just over a little over 200 patients currently. And the goal is to get to over 1,000 patients and then potentially look into franchising options. And at that point, I would basically go around the country educating people in the functional medicine practices and proper medicinal practices for an HRT clinic. So I guess my end all goal is to change the game, change the way that America does HRT, because it's not done properly right now. Too many women are overdosed with testosterone and not and other hormones aren't addressed. And men are typically just pushed so many products that aren't necessary because they have the pockets for it. So that's one goal, is to change the way that we approach the HRT side of things, but also change the entire bodybuilding approach. Everyone has this inclination that in order to be successful in bodybuilding, you have to be very unhealthy. And that is so not true. A healthy body is a responsive body. The more toxic and stressed a body is, the less it responds, the less muscle you grow, the less fat you lose. Everything works better when your health is optimized. So, we have to basically deprogram all the garbage that we've learned the past 20 to 30 years and start on a clean slate of knowledge. These are the hormones that are bioidentical to what your body already creates naturally. These are hormones that aren't even approved for human use. So let's think about what's wiser from a long-term approach here. Those are my end all goals. Shift the thinking around bodybuilding and educate people that they can still reach the Olympia. They can still reach their goals in just taking a smarter, lower risk approach. Part of that is also people acknowledging that genetics matter. And no matter how much drugs you do, it's not going to change that. That's a big part of it too, because I was one of those people guilty of it. You and I, we were in the Boston Lloyd times. So we used to think, oh, whatever we don't have genetics wise, we'll just add another 1,000 androgens a week and make up for it. And we saw how that turned out. So, I care about the sport so much. I don't want to see it die. I don't want to see the decline in desire to do it because of a misunderstanding of how we approach it. Every sport has its risks. Nobody goes into NASCAR saying they don't want to drive fast. Every sport has its risks, but it's about calculated risks and intelligent risks. And that's the difference that I'm trying to make.
Love it, man. That's some powerful stuff. Kind of the last question I got for here, Matt.
Yep.
You're obviously a busy individual. You've got a lot going on. You care about a lot of people in terms of just, caring for your clients and taking care of your clients' needs and things like that. What do you kind of do to protect yourself in terms of your own health, your own, mind? What do you like to do for fun? What do you like to do just outside of this whole world that you're living in right now in terms of coaching and building brands and businesses?
That is a great question. I have actually been better about this the last few years, but for the first about 9 years of coaching, I was not good at this. I sacrificed my health, my body, my goals, my passion, my happiness. I sacrificed everything and put it into my athletes. And I realized after so long how crappy I felt. I was unhealthy. I was depressed. I had mental health battles, all these things, all because I didn't set appropriate boundaries. I was so passionate that I didn't even think about myself. So, one evolution that I've had the last couple of years, the more I educated myself about health, I realized that I needed to do these things too and walk the walk, so to speak. So I've set more boundaries. I take half days. Sometimes I take full days off. I am typically working 7 days a week, but some days I do take days off, especially if me and my girlfriend want to plan something. This year we got a boat. So when the weather was nice, I'd take a Saturday or half of a Sunday and we'd go out boating for the day. I love shooting guns. I love cars. So the last couple of years, I realized how toxic my obsession with bodybuilding was, and I realized that I had no other outlet. So then once I got out of bodybuilding, I just had nothing. And so I had to start finding other outlets because I was so entrenched in my work in bodybuilding. No longer had a passion for bodybuilding.
Mm.
I lost my own desire to lift and progress in the gym and stuff like that. I lost my desire to go to the gym for a while. I think that was during 2022. We all kind of like had time out of the gym. Some people went back ferocious. Some people were just like, you know. So I had to find other avenues to separate my work and my fun. Um, so those are the kind of things that I do now, but a big part of it is boundaries, setting boundaries with my cell phone. I don't take calls after 7 or 8 p.m. I don't take texts and DMs after 8 p.m. so that I can wind down and relax and get a good night's sleep and stuff like that. I'm still bad about checking my phone as soon as I wake up, but I'm trying to work around that. Get outside and do a walk in the sun first thing in the morning, support my circadian rhythm. Um, that I'd say that's the biggest thing is, managing stress and making the choice of it, did I sleep well enough? Am I too stressed to go have an intense workout? Is that just going to drive my issues further? Am I too distracted to have a good training session? Because a lot of the motivational talks that bodybuilding had over the last decade or so was just about suck it up, team no sleep, train no matter what, no rest days and stuff like that. And that's all garbage. You need to have optimal sleep to have an optimal training session. And if you're too distracted because of various stressors going on in your mind, is it worth doing that workout, or are you better off taking a rest day and then having a good workout the next day? It's obviously different for me because I'm not trying to be an elite athlete. So I think people have to make that decision for themselves too. Like, how important is this really? Is it the end of the world if I miss a workout? Is it finding that proper balance in comparison to what their actual goals are and being realistic about that stuff? Too many of us are extremists, and that ends up being detrimental to our mental health, our social skills, all those things. And I think that's impacted society as a whole.
Awesome, man. Very, very well put. Very well said. Wise words. Matt, I want to thank you, man, for coming on to the podcast. Obviously, again, you've got a lot going on. You're busy, but I really appreciate you sharing your story, man, sharing some of your bodybuilding, business, and life insights with us. Before I do a quick outro, I want to kind of give you the platform to share any final thoughts, any final words that you might have, any shout outs, sponsors, where people can connect with you, websites, whatever you got for us. I'm going to turn it over to you. I'll do a quick outro and that'll be a wrap. So platform's yours.
Cool. I appreciate that. I guess the last thing I'll say is, if anyone has any questions for me, I'm an open book. You can reach out to me for anything, whether it's just shooting the shit about functional medicine, about health, about bodybuilding, or if it's a more personal question about something that you've been struggling with personally. I'm happy to set up a consult and we can dig into it and figure out what's going on for you. Shout out wise, check out Rejuvenate HRT. If you have any questions about your health, your hormonal health, your metabolic health, we are there to support athletes in their goals. If you guys ever want to reach out to me personally, you can reach me at matt@thebodytechnicians.com. My IG is matt_thebodytech.
Cool. All right. And I think I saw on your Instagram, you're 4 subscribers away from 10,000 on Instagram. So, man, everybody out there, go follow Matt, get him to 10,000, right?
I know. It's funny. I was actually, I don't even pay attention to it, but some of my teammates messaged me and said, dude, you're at this number and that number. And I guess at one point I was over 10,000. Now it's dipped back down. It's like, God, now it's like messing with me that it's this up and down. People don't like me, or something like that. But I try to not put too much pressure on it. But yeah, that would be cool if I could get a couple more and get right back over that 10K mark.
Well, from my understanding, once you hit that 10K mark on Instagram, it kind of unlocks some doors in terms of like you can do different things. And I'm talking like, just like a YouTube, you can post up like a YouTube on an Instagram story and somebody can, there's just different.
I didn't know that.
It's from my understanding, what I've learned about it, I'm, nowhere close to that, but it unlocks certain doors and you can do more things. And when you are a coach or you have like some sort of business type stuff on your Instagram, it actually can be a huge positive. So that 10,000K actually can be a very beneficial thing for people that are using Instagram more for business purposes. So
well, that's awesome. Yeah, in that case, let's pump those numbers up. I appreciate any support that anyone can send me.
Well, thank you so much, Matt. Really appreciate your time. Okay.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, you're welcome. All of you who are tuning into another episode of Behind the Muscle podcast, I just want to say thank you so very much. A couple of quick things I would just ask all of you. First of all, make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube. That's really important because I release all these episodes first on YouTube, and then I'll distribute them to iTunes, CastBox, and some of the other major podcast platforms. So if you want to stay current, up to date on all the Behind the Muscle podcast episodes, make sure you are subscribed on YouTube. And then also please share this specific episode with Matt on your Instagram stories. Make sure you tag Matt, tag Behind the Muscle, so that we know that you listened to this episode specifically, found great value in it, in which I know you did. And then also like I just said, make sure you give Matt a follow. You guys can scroll down into the show notes, whether you're on YouTube, iTunes, Castbox, Podbean. Just go down to the show notes. Matt's Instagram will be there. Give him a follow. Also, that's where you can find Behind the Muscle Podcast Instagram as well. And then finally, I will leave you all with this. Remember, behind the muscle, there's always a story. We'll catch you guys later.